Bush knew she'd fire me. That's fine, the New York Times would beg to hire me. Till then I'd log alone. Blah, 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 blah.
So I'm going to turn it over to Ann and Philip. They have some clips that they're going to show you and also talk a little bit about Not Evil, Just Wrong.
But we came into the film through the story of DDT, through the story of Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, and the success, basically the very first success of the environmental movement, which was with them demonizing DDT. Much in the way that they're now trying to demonize CO2. The stuff that's coming out of our mouths, the idea that that's somehow, you know, a toxin, or a pollutant, or a toxic pollutant, as they like to say. You know, complete nonsense. But they did succeed, and they're very good at getting their message out. They're much better at getting their message out than we are. So they persuaded America that DDT was a problem. And DDT was a pesticide that had this miraculous second use. I don't know, do you all know the DDT story? Silent Spring, Rachel Carson? Yes, nodding. Not everyone nodding, but anyone who's not nodding. It is a huge human rights story. And I think one of the things that conservatives are very good at, they're very good at ideas. I used to be a liberal, and so I think I have some insights. And as I say, I'm a revert. You know the way the Muslims say that everyone's born a Muslim and that you lose your way and then eventually you go back? So basically, I think everyone's born a conservative. And they may lose their way, get excited about things, but eventually they should go back to conservatism. The problem with conservatism for me is that it's lacking in emotion. It's lacking in all the cool things. The thing that drives young people crazy is human rights. And this is a human rights issue. Global warming is a human rights issue. DDT is a human rights issue. It's like, what's the motivation of environmentalists? What makes them tick? What are they getting off on? And I think there's an awful lot of stuff that's going on with them. Mostly they don't like people. Mostly they don't like us. Mostly they think that we're the problem. They're not the problem, but we are. The rest of us are. Ordinary people are. And they think there's too many of us. So it's a good thing, you know. But it's also like cap and trade. Every time somebody says that to you, you must always make, oh, you're talking about the global warming tax. You're talking about the global warming tax. You're talking about the carbon tax. You're talking about the carbon tax. I mean, as the Democrats have said, and we've seen a lot of quotes this week from Democrats who said, if the American people realised that it's a tax, it hasn't got a hope. I mean, you've seen those quotes. I mean, you know, this cap and trade thing, don't accept it. We're not doing it. We're not talking that. That's their talk. So, you're talking about the global warming tax, you're talking about the global warming tax, you're talking about the global warming tax? Oh, well, guess what? We think the global warming tax is a really bad idea, and we think the American people won't accept the global warming tax. So, we're doing loads and loads of media, we're travelling around the country, we're on the go the whole time, talking to groups. I mean, this is going to be a grassroots thing. I mean, look at the tea parties. It's just extraordinary what happened there. People, if people have the message sent out to them in a very simple way, they're going to go nuts. But cap and trade, it's like, it's very, what does that mean? That's very complicated, you know? And of course, they're using it for a very particular reason. They're making it like something like, well, that's way too complicated for me to understand. Well, guess what? Your energy costs are going to double. Is that what you want? Make it simple. Guess what? Your energy costs are going to double. They're going to take away coal out of the equation in America.
The factories are going to close.
All the factories are going to close. They're going to have great jobs in China and India. You know? And they're going to win. They're going to win out. I mean, we went, in this film, we go to Gent in Kentucky, where there's this huge, fantastic steel plant. That steel plant should have been in Spain. The mothership of that steel company was in Spain. They couldn't expand in Spain because Spain signed the Kyoto Agreement and they couldn't afford it. So we won, America won those jobs. But they're going to lose those jobs if Obama has his way. And I said this morning, the other thing I think about Obama and Michelle and all that, I think life has been, and all environmentalists and all those liberals, life has been so good to them. We often say this, how you know you're really, really rich is when your children come home and tell you that they're environmentalists. That's when you know, my God, honey, we've made it. We're obviously incredibly rich because our children are so disconnected from the world. Michelle Obama and Barack Obama are disconnected. They're disconnected from the world. Michelle Obama thinks of herself as a victim. Get over yourself, girlfriend. Life was so good to them. And by the way, I'm not saying they don't deserve it. They're very bright and intelligent. And they get up at 4:30 or 5, whatever, and that's why she's got the great arms. But listen, you know, they deserve it. But the idea that they're victims is complete nonsense. This is, you know, and I just think they're disconnected. They're disconnected from where things come from. They're disconnected from the fact that when you plug in things, when you plug a thing into the wall, they're disconnected from where that comes from. It comes from a coal plant. And it's great. And have you ever stood beside a coal plant in America? you can have a car running past it, a white car, and it will never get dark. It will never become a dirty car because already they've got all these environmental regulations. So it's, anyway, that's my
I'm all for, by the way, I'm all for being disconnected from where things come from. Okay. You know, I don't really want to know where electricity comes from because I just want it to work. You know, people say to us, have you followed Al Gore in his private jet and his carbon footprint? And I'm going, I want everyone in Africa to have a private jet. Please, Al Gore, keep a private jet, fly all over the world, just don't land. But don't stop people in Africa from having private jets and having cars and jobs and industry and industrialization and seeing their child's 5th birthday, which a lot of them aren't at the moment. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned homeschoolers. I am one. I only own 2 guns. They're in my loft, not my basement. But I'm curious, what, if anything, you're doing to reach out to the homeschooling community? Are you going to have clips that would cater toward homeschool bloggers, for instance, or any techniques like that? Will you have this film shown in homeschooling networks? We'd
love that.
We'd love that.
If you have any suggestions about how to get in touch with homeschoolers, we would love to.
Yeah.
If there's a network of them, we really are very interested in homeschoolers because that's exactly why they're homeschooling their children, because their children will be forced to watch an inconvenient truth and it's passing the science.
Ryan Brown is the executive director of the National Organization for Marriage. He wanted to introduce himself to all of you and talk a little bit about what his organization is doing.
Thank you. I was thoroughly enjoying myself. I didn't think that any issue, I thought that dealing with same-sex marriage would be an issue that's the most controversial, and we're told repeatedly that we've already lost. And you know, this is the same sort of thing. If you hear your opponents again and again saying, the debate's over, you've lost, they must be concerned about something. And that seems to be, especially in the last few weeks with the Supreme Court decision in Iowa and Vermont being the first legislature to bring same-sex marriage to that state. Our mission is to protect marriage and the faith communities that sustain it. What does that mean? Well, we want to highlight the very real effects on our liberties, and especially on religious organizations, businesses, and individuals. Now, this is another thing that the media and our opponents don't want you to hear. We don't need to guess at what the effects are that I'm bringing up. They've already happened. When in Massachusetts, you have Catholic Charities Adoption Agency, one of the oldest adoption agencies in the country, being told that it has to make a choice between its religious beliefs and acting on those beliefs and the ability to adopt children out, adopt children, the most needy children, some of the older children, very difficult to place, and it has to make a choice. And if it doesn't choose to rid itself of its outdated, outmoded, discriminatory religious beliefs and place children with same-sex couples, if it doesn't choose that, then it cannot adopt children at all. And that was the choice put to Boston Catholic Charities Adoption Agency. And what happened? They were put out of business. Was there a religious exemption offered? No. Why? Because the argument of those who want to redefine marriage is very simple and very clear. When you cut through the clutter, when you cut through the civil rights arguments, it is that there is no difference between same-sex and opposite-sex couples. And those of us who believe that there is some difference are the equivalent of bigots, of racists. Now, if you put this idea into the law, we don't have to guess what it means. It means that the law will treat us as such. How does the law treat racial bigots? Can you get a professional license and run your practice along openly racist lines? Of course not. Can you get a radio broadcasting license? No. Can you have a 501c3 tax-exempt organization that runs against openly racist lines? No. This has been litigated in the Bob Jones case, in my opinion, rightly so. But Bob Jones University cannot operate and keep its 501c3 status if it is racist, right? So what happens to all of these religious organizations that believe that there's something intrinsically good about men and women coming together, the two great halves of humanity, to bear the next generation, so that children can know and be known by, love and be loved by their mother and father? What happens to those organizations? They don't get 501c3 tax-exempt status. It is encoded, it is stamped, it is put into the law that they are evil discriminators. And of course, if you put that into the law, they're going to be treated as such.
We're obviously fighting in multiple states, and in each state it's a little different. In New York, you have a Senate fight. There's a fight in the Senate whether they're going to be able to pass same-sex marriage there. The governor's already said he would sign it. In New Jersey, you also have a fight in the Senate. In Iowa, you have a long-term fight. You got to basically replace some legislators in order to get a constitutional amendment in Iowa, and so that's going to be a protracted battle there. And on the federal level, you have the repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act. There's also a federal lawsuit to try and remove part of the Defense of Marriage Act through the courts, and that's another big concern. So we need to fight it out and get people who believe that marriage is the union of a man and a woman to contact their congressmen and their state legislators and vote accordingly. I mean, really what's happening in the Northeast has to do with the real disconnect between legislators and voters. Iowa is a perfect example of the way those that want to redefine marriage have focused their efforts. They went through a court. They forced it on a state in which 62% or more of voters don't want same-sex marriage, so they had to use the courts to force it on them, and they chose a state in which there's no direct initiative and referenda, whereas in California, the voters had recourse to just getting enough signatures and getting it on the ballot and voting. You don't have that in Iowa. So it's really a fundamentally anti-democratic movement, trying to do whatever you can to stop voters from having a say. And even in Vermont, where the legislature passed same-sex marriage, it absolutely refused to allow a referendum. Our real focus is on the very real public policy implications of same-sex marriage, how it will affect all of us, how it will affect not just one religious group, but religious liberty in general. So yeah, our focus is on making the arguments, the public arguments that will win in the same-sex marriage issue, the same-sex marriage debate. I mean, we know from California, it doesn't matter if people are religious or not. People don't want their children taught in the schools that same-sex marriage is the same as marriage between a husband and a wife. They don't want that. It doesn't matter if they're religious or not. And so, there's a deep-seated common sense in the American people. Even people that may not be religious understand that there's something unique and special about marriage between a man and a woman.
They used to talk about global warming. They don't talk about global warming anymore. They talk about climate change, and Al Gore talks about the climate crisis. So they keep on changing the language, and you need to say to them, why are you changing the language? Let's keep with your language. Let's keep with global warming. And it hasn't warmed in 10 years. So why do you talk about that? I mean, most of this is about changing the way America lives and changing the way the world is. And this is what a lot of liberals want to do, and it's what a lot of environmentalists want to do. They don't like progress. They don't like industrialization. They think that the world would be better off without humans in it. And I think they need to be called on that. I think it's a very anti-human movement. They think badly of humans. They think that humans that we're polluters, that we destroy everything we touch. And they seem to have this romantic notion about nature, about things that are natural. And as I say to people, I don't want anything to do with natural. Cancer is natural. Anthrax is natural. What else is awful that's natural? Arsenic is natural. Like, there's loads of cancer is natural. Tuberculosis is natural. We don't want anything to do with that. Here in America, people live into their 90s, and that's a marvellous thing. And you know why they do? It's because of electricity. Electricity makes you safe, because you have things like a refrigerator, so your food is always very safe to eat. Not having electricity, not having a definite power supply is a real problem. Environmentalists talk about renewables, and I'm all in favour of renewables. I think it's a great idea. Windmills, solar panels, bring it on, because we need more energy, not less. But the idea that America at the moment is powered by about 80% fossil fuels, the idea that you can do away with that, and Al Gore suggests we can do away with that in 10 years. Now, everyone needs to stop, and everyone needs to stop drinking the Kool-Aid. This is nonsense. This is impossible. It cannot be achieved. I think there's a place for windmills. If that's what rocks your boat, if that's what you'd like to do it. Go for it. Yourself and your family should go for that yourselves. But don't impose it on the rest of the American people. If you really care about the environment, the best way to protect the environment is to get rich. That's the very best way to get very, 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 very rich, and you will have no problem with the environment. If you look at Africa, for example, if you look at somewhere like Madagascar, where they're cutting down the rainforest, people cut down the rainforest there because they're poor, and they need it for firewood. Make them rich, and they won't need to do that, and they'll protect the forest because they like to look at it, and they'll protect the seas because they like to look at that, and they like to play there. But that can only be achieved when people have achieved wealth, and they won't achieve wealth if they live in what environmentalists like to call in a traditional way, if they live in their mud huts. They won't get rich because they'll be sick all the time.